I wanted to let you know, as you just heard, that this session will be recorded for our future learning. So in the first two sessions of this series, just to bring everyone up to speed, we heard from experts on the history and context surrounding dual language educational models, best practices in bilingual education, and tonight we will be exploring the challenges and creative approaches
I'm getting a lot of phone calls.
to building a strong bilingual educator pipeline.
I think you muted Carolyn. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I muted everyone, so can you unmute yourself, Carolyn?
I unmuted. Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, this might be a repeat again. But I was just saying that I am a Puerto Rican educator myself, and so I know firsthand the impact that a bilingual and bicultural teacher can have on a student. And I'm excited to learn about this topic with each of you tonight. So each speaker will present for about 10 minutes. And at the end of our time together, they will be available to answer audience questions. So moving right into our first speaker, we have Akita Kapoor. Akita has been at the forefront of advancing the careers of bilingual and SEL educators for over 2 decades, addressing critical barriers that have limited the growth of the bilingual educator workforce. She piloted Massachusetts' first district-based aspiring bilingual educator pipeline, creating pathways for future educators to support multilingual learners effectively. As part of the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we all know as DESE, Teacher Diversification and Retention Initiatives, Akita developed and now implements a culturally and linguistically responsive MTEL coaching model accessible to districts across the Commonwealth. She is currently expanding this work with a model designed to support multilingual paraeducators whose first language is not English in passing the Para-Pro exam. Take it away, Akita.
Thank you for that introduction and welcome everybody. I'm going to project, I have some slides, I'm going to project them and then we shall go through. Is the screen visible? Yes? Okay, great. Well, we are all here to talk about why the bilingual educator pipeline has come to a trickle. Like it's not increasing at the rate that we all want. So before we even begin to discuss those factors, I wanted to actually look at this quote from Noam Chomsky. Questions about language are essentially questions about power. So this quote emphasizes the deep connection between language and society. The quote serves as a lens to understand the historical and systemic barriers, including linguistic racism and the enduring perception of English as the language of power here in the United States. And this has long hindered the development of a robust bilingual education pipeline. It is with this understanding that I want to delve into three factors that I believe are the primary forces behind a bilingual educator pipeline that struggles to achieve robustness. These three factors have been informed by my own experience working with aspiring bilingual educators for the past 20 years. But before I even go into those factors, I do want to acknowledge and celebrate the efforts and wins of those who are and have been supporting bilingual education in Massachusetts and beyond. We do have bright spots. I know we're discussing problems, and I think sometimes when we're discussing problems, we forget to acknowledge that there are highlights. However, the urgency of addressing the challenges remains paramount. Today, I'll discuss these three primary reasons why we are still not experiencing the growth in bilingual educators and bilingual programming that our students and families so desperately need and deserve. So, factor one. I know in our previous webinar this was discussed, and I'm going to touch on it a little bit because it's very relevant to our discussion today. Is factor number one is our current mindset around bilingualism, which is shaped by historical and societal perceptions of bilingual education over the past century. Um, Factor number two, the rate at which racially and linguistically diverse students are entering schools is far outpacing our ability to recruit, license, hire, and retain bilingual educators. That means ed prep programs, districts, states, we might be putting out lots of effort into hiring, recruiting and hiring and licensing educators, but the rate at which our students, our linguistically diverse students, is outpacing the rate at which we are making progress. Factor number three, becoming a teacher is challenging and often undervalued. Massachusetts has some of the most rigorous licensure exams in the nation, coupled with the highest passing thresholds. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So all of this may sound like these three factors may sound like we're in an impossible situation, but I promise you that by the end, despite these hurdles, I believe change is possible and we can all make a difference. So let's begin with factor one. In this little map or timeline that you see here, it's really a quick overview of the historical backdrop of bilingual education. It's important to note that English only and anti-immigrant values have been deeply embedded in the history of the United States for well over a century. For instance, the 1920s English only legislation in Massachusetts set the stage for decades of policies that marginalized non-English speakers. The 1968 Bilingual Education Act was a milestone providing federal support for bilingual programs and acknowledging the value of linguistic diversity. However, then again, in 1980s and 1990s, we saw a shift towards subtractive bilingualism policies. And then, of course, question two in Massachusetts in 2002 further curtailed efforts by mandating English only instruction. And then finally, the pendulum swung back in 2017 with the passage of the Look Act, which once again supported bilingual education. However, I want to remind you that 2017, that the passage of the Look Act coincided with the very strong rise in anti-immigrant movement during the 2016 election cycle, a sentiment that persists today, as we saw in election cycle 2024. So I want you to imagine like these are like three different factors kind of all coalescing like or in one area. And it it is like, it is a challenging situation. So that was factor one. I wanted to just give an overview of that historical background because it's necessary to understand we're working toward increasing bilingual educators, but we have all this history and the mindset and values that we're also pushing against. So if we look at now, we're going to go into this next slide. Can you guys see this chart, this graph okay? All right. So these troubling political and societal views around bilingualism and immigration that exist today are coupled with the national teacher shortage. As we know that there's the rapid increase in racially and linguistically diverse student populations is far outpacing the rate in which we are diversifying the teacher workforce. Although this graph, this is from the Department of Education, DESE, and they didn't have one that was specifically targeted for linguistically diverse students, but these are students of color and teachers of color, which encompass linguistically diverse student population as well as teacher population. If you look right here, and this was in taken in 2023, but we're in 2025. we are increasing. Do you see how we are increasing? But look at the rate in which students of color are increasing. The gap in 2030 is going to be far wider than it was when it first began, when they took this in 2011. When you look at it, the gap continues to get wider, even despite our current efforts. So, what in the world is causing this? I guess that's the question, right? Like, why is it that there are so many educators, bilingual educators? We have, and later on, I know Ari is going to speak about this, and Eric and Dr. Proctor are going to speak about all other factors. But what is it what's preventing um, many of our paraeducators, many of our bilingual community members from other countries that are educators from becoming bilingual educators here in Massachusetts and beyond? So let's take a look at that next. This is the next slide right here. Okay. So this graph is basically showing, this is again taken from data from 20 aspiring bilingual educators that I'm currently working with. And when I interviewed them, I went through each of their pathways. Like every individual goes through, has their own story and has their own struggles. But in general, on average, many of them spent 4 years getting a bachelor's degree. If they were paraeducators, some of them had to finish that degree. And that usually this is like the minimum. So 4 years. Some take 5 years to finish that bachelor's degree. Then you must pass the communication literacy reading and writing MTEL. Typically, that takes 1 to 2 years. I put it here as 1 year. The reason being, the MTEL, the communication literacy reading and writing, especially the writing, is heavily based in English grammar. It is, and DESE has acknowledged that, and they said within 2 years they are going to be revamping that exam. I don't know what that exactly is going to look like, but the current exam is heavily grounded in grammar. DESE does have alternative exams that they have allowed educators to pursue, but again, there is a large component that is based on English grammar. Can bilingual educators overcome this? Yes, they can, but with the right support. I'm going to continue to go with this like timeline of like how long it takes to become a bilingual educator, because it's really crucial to understand why that significant gap exists in the previous graph. Foundations of reading and general curriculum are two other MTELs. This is for an elementary school bilingual educator. That can take up to 2 years for a bilingual educator who is dominant in another language. And then, of course, you have to get your bilingual ed endorsement, which can be concurrent with courses and a practicum that you would take. And this is all requirements to get your initial license. So on average, 3 to 5 years after a bachelor's degree. That is a lot of time. That's if you do it rather quickly. Some of the educators that I've met, they have been struggling, like let's say with the general curriculum math, they've taken it 4 times, 5 times, and they spend many years trying to get through these licensure requirements, which I know many of us on this call wish we could change. So as we saw in the chart, the hold on. Some of the key observations I wanted to point out in this graph about like how long it's taking everybody to finish an exam. For the time commitment that it takes to complete this challenge, for many aspiring educators, they burn out. They say they have financial burdens. They have to work sometimes in another job to finish what they need to do, and it's taking too long to become a bilingual educator. Many of them feel like the amount of time it's going to take to become a bilingual educator doesn't doesn't always justify the investment of time and money to enter the profession. And I'm sure Eric will also touch on this, that there's this mass exodus of teachers right now across the nation. And there are many different factors that are impacting teacher stress and anxiety. And then if you're a bilingual educator and you have a society and exams and licensure requirements that are really geared toward an English only education, it becomes the gap becomes wider and wider in terms of recruiting and retaining a pipeline that is linguistically diverse. So, what do we do? We can learn from each other and what other states are doing, what's working and what is not. I want to take a look at what California is doing to address these issues. And that's not only California. I know Texas and many other states have, they have in California, I think there's over 1 million bilingual, students that need bilingual educators. And many of the ed prep programs and the districts in the state are revamping their licensure requirements. And Massachusetts has the most rigorous requirements from based on my evaluation of like different states. But let's look at what's happening in California. So what they have done is that for the mindset piece, they similar to the Look Act, they passed Proposition 58, which is shifting societal attitudes by promoting bilingualism as an asset. It is a specific legislation to expand on dual language programming in particular. And they also have for the licensure requirements, they have given teachers and educators and paraprofessional options. It's not necessary to just use an exam to meet those requirements. They have competency-based evaluations now. So they have different, like it's almost like a menu of different ways that an educator can choose to become licensed. And they are offering many more incentives and money for bilingual educators. They're almost on this fast track. So when they enter, let's say, an ed prep program, the ed prep programs prioritize them. They prioritize their enrollment. They prioritize like giving them an incentive, more money. They give them the extra support. So if it is a priority, then everybody has to put money, effort, and time behind that belief. So Massachusetts, that is where we have to go. Massachusetts, like California, has been investing money in recruiting and retaining educators who reflect diversity of the student population, like in grow your own pipelines. But it has to continue. It cannot stop. And um, the way to make change for all of us, like the call to action for all of us is we may seem like it's like an uphill battle, but if other states can change policy around licensure, I believe that Massachusetts can do it too. We recently did that with MCAS. And so I'm hoping that we can advocate for increased funding to support bilingual education, to be champions of the idea that bilingualism is a strength. That is something we have in order to change mindset. Just like we're having this meeting now, we all, in our conversations with individuals, with colleagues, with parents in particular, we have to leverage and highlight that bilingualism is an asset. And I have to share this one thing before I go. So my most recent student who is trying to become a bilingual educator, she was very nervous about taking her communication and literacy MTEL, the reading and the writing. And she's a paraprofessional. And she had been postponing taking her reading exam for years. So when I met with her, she said that my English isn't very good, and I know that I won't do well on this test, and I'm scared to take the exam. And I said, you're looking at it as if your bilingualism is a deficit when it's actually an asset. And if you know how to leverage your bilingualism, you will do well on this exam. So she didn't understand what exactly I was talking about. So when we started working, we did leverage her first language and helping her understand how she could utilize her first language in actually understanding reading in English and understanding how to write in English, and how even like many of the challenging words that she was reading had cognates in Spanish and had a Latin derivative. Like there was I forget, it was like a fan, the word fan aficionado. Like she understood the English word because of the Spanish word. And so she started using all of these, she started treating her first language as her strength. So she recently got her score report, and this actually shocked me. I had a feeling she was going to pass, but I did not know how high, how well she was going to do. So when she got her score report, she showed it to me. So on the MTEL, they don't give you it's out of 240. They do not give you your score report and say you got 240. They have a check marks. So it's like most, many, some, limited. And so on her reading, like all the things about critical eye, she had most, many. And she's like, how did I do this? And she says, and she was like shocked. And she said, I called every single person to show them my score report. And again, how did she get that? It's because she tapped into her bilingual assets. On that note, I want to encourage all of you to encourage all of the bilingual friends you have and the community we have to leverage that, to leverage those strengths so that we can build a Massachusetts that's more inclusive and is going to do a better job at building our bilingual ed pipeline. So that is it for me, and I will pass it back to you, Carolyn.
All right. Thank you very much, Akita, for highlighting those three barriers and ending with such a hopeful and lovely story about your student. So our next speaker is Ari Brands. Ari uses they, them pronouns and began organizing families at St. Stephen's Youth Program in 2015. Ari built up the family organizing program at SSYP through campaigns for public education and immigrant justice. They also led SSYP to pilot and grow the Parent Mentor Program. From 2019 to 2022, they worked organizing across the city with the Boston Teachers Union. They returned to SSYP in 2022 as Director of Organizing, and this year at SSYP, Ari is piloting Ladders of Opportunity, a program that prepares multilingual parents for careers as paraprofessionals and future teachers. Bilingual education is an issue close to Ari's heart. They grew up in a Spanish immersion dual language school in Colorado. Thank you for joining us, Ari.
All right. Thanks so much. Can you all hear me? Yes. Okay, great. So thanks for taking the time, everybody, to be here tonight. I'm just going to share my screen real fast. Go. Okay. So I'm going to be talking tonight about a little bit of a different part of the bilingual educator pipeline, and that's the work that we're doing at St. Stephen's Youth Programs around the parent or community to paraprofessional pipeline, right? Because if we want to think of this as a pipeline all the way through community members, all the way through school leaders, even superintendents and all of that, we need to start as well with the community. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to the team. We do this work at St. Stephen's as a team. So Rafa, Suhei, Ursula, and then a whole bunch more people. I see about 10 St. Stephen's parents here on this Zoom as well. So I want to give them a shout out. Everybody has really been impactful in growing this program. St. Stephen's Youth Programs is a nonprofit based in South End and Lower Roxbury, although we work with families and in schools across the city. Our mission is to promote equity in education, employment, and opportunity through long-term relationships with young people and their families and communities. People hear St. Stephen's Youth Programs. We do run after-school programs and youth jobs, but the piece of it that many people don't actually know about is our work with families. And so today I'm going to be talking about kind of what the Parent Mentor Program is, how we leverage that to then bring multilingual community members and parents and caregivers from a role as just a parent in the school into a role as an educator and paraprofessional, and hopefully in the future as well, taking those next steps with Akita from a paraprofessional to a teacher. So the first thing first is that people need just to be exposed to what a career in education looks like, right? We have parents that work with us who were teachers for 20 years in their country and then moved to the United States, but because maybe they don't speak enough English, they think they can't be a teacher. We also have people who have probably never set foot in a classroom after they graduated or after their own schooling experience. And so this is an opportunity for them to actually be in a classroom and experience what it's like to work with kids. So the way it works is St. Stephen's partners with schools. This year we have 6 different schools in BPS that we're working with. We recruit a cohort of parents and guardians from that school, and then we match them with teachers, and they work in the classroom 2.5 hours a day, 4 days a week, one-on-one or in small groups with the students in that classroom. And then on Fridays, they come to St. Stephen's where we do leadership development trainings with them. It's not only a model of family engagement in the schools, but it really creates a culture of transformation. Personally, for our parent mentors, for students in their classrooms, for schools to become centers of community, and through our advocacy work as well, for powerful communities. So I'm just going to share a little video real fast because I think it says more about this program than I can say. And this video, this video was created by the AFT. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I'm just going to show a couple parts. But here we go. Hold on one second. Optimize for video sharing. Here we go.
El programa para Mentor nos permite a nosotros como padres estar adentro de las escuelas. Nosotros le asistimos a los maestros en la clase y tenemos un 1-a-1 con los niños en alguna deshabilitado que están.
Having a parent mentor is like having a second teacher in the classroom to help out with the kids, with their phonics, with their reading development, with their math.
La oportunidad de trabajar en la escuela donde estudian mis nietos es algo maravilloso.
Miss Amanda is amazing. I know I can always count on her. She is here every day with a smile. She loves each of the children unconditionally. She's never afraid to jump in with any of the students.
She speaks Spanish, so working with kids who are ELLs in my classroom, with parents who are speaking Spanish, connecting with a parent who's a native speaker makes things run a lot smoother and makes families feel interconnected in the classroom as well.
El programa para Mentor.
Last bit.
Los padres mentores, una vez terminan el programa, salen transformados.
Es un programa que nos ayuda a nosotros a tener visión e inspiración. Me inspira a ser maestra.
Los padres mentores, una vez terminan.
Hopefully you could all hear that, right? Great. Um, So what we were finding with our parent mentors, and only about 20% of our parent mentors are monolingual English speakers, and about 60% are monolingual speakers of another language, not just Spanish, but usually we have about 4 or 5 different languages that are represented in the group. Just share this. So what we were finding is that a lot of our, oops, hold on. There we go. We were finding that a lot of our parent mentors discovered a passion for becoming educators. And so when we actually looked in counting, we found.
Sorry to interrupt. It's not screen sharing, it's mirroring. It's showing your display settings.
Oh, hold on. Better?
There we go. Thank you.
Great. So when we actually started counting, we found that over a third of our parent mentors were getting jobs in Boston Public Schools. A lot of those were as bus monitors, lunch monitors, but also as paraprofessionals. And we said, what can we do to really make this into a pipeline where we're providing structured support for them to be able to do that? And so what we came up with is a program we're calling Ladders of Opportunity. And the long-term goal of that program is that our participants achieve economic mobility for themselves and their families and creates a talent pipeline that develops parents into educators who represent students' cultural, racial, and linguistic backgrounds and are trained in culturally relevant methodology. As Akita was saying, with the growing number of students who speak languages other than English, there's also a benefit there, which is that their families are also in Boston and also have the potential to become educators in our system. So Ladders of Opportunity has a lot of different pieces. I'm not going to go into all of it, but the idea is that no matter what level of education in English a parent comes to us with, there's a step that they can take to further their career. So whether that's learning English with us and then, completing their high school diploma or equivalent, we have participants doing both of those things. For folks who speak Spanish and don't speak enough English yet to enroll in college or pass the parapro test, we're working with Urban College to offer lead teacher credentials, so they'll be able to work at least in early childhood settings. And we have 17 participants who just passed their first Urban College child growth and development course in Spanish. We're really proud of them. And then, so that's kind of 3A. 3B is becoming a paraprofessional. And so once they speak around level 4 English or above, we are working to get them ready to pass the parapro test. I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, but it is a real challenge for our folks to pass this test. And we are facing some struggles, to be honest, in getting people past that hurdle. But we have lots of support, and it's happened before with many St. Stephen's parent mentors, especially through, and I just have to give a shout out, BPS runs a great program for multilingual parents to become paraprofessionals. And we've had a number of parents go through that and succeed at passing their parapro test. And then we obviously have step 4 here, becoming a teacher. We want to make sure that that's always kind of when we're talking with our families about this, that it doesn't just end at paraprofessional, right? That then you can take those next steps in the pipeline. So what's special about what we do at St. Stephen's? We have school-based coordinators that support each participant to set and meet their goals around this. So we're building a lot of social capital through the relationships in our cohorts. We have language access with interpretation in sometimes up to 5 different languages. We have a great partnership with Right Boston and Full Circle Teacher. Shout out again to Akita here, who have developed a rubric and trainings on culturally and linguistically sustaining practices for our parent mentors and kind of with a lens on what paraprofessionals who have those skills would have. We also offer wraparound supports at St. Stephen's. We have childcare, a social worker, and stipends for completion. And as you can see in the picture, we have a lot of fun together. You got to have fun while you do it. Some of the challenges that we're facing in this work is passing the parapro test. It is really not easy for folks to pass. We just had about 10 people go through a para-prep course at Roxbury Community College, and none of them passed the test, right? And so that says to us that the prep work that's happening there is not it. And so we're going to be working with Akita and with some other folks to build our own in-house test prep program to make sure that they're able to pass. We are also finding that the challenges to getting hired in a school for our folks, even if they've passed the parapro test or have the higher ed credentials that they need to not be able to take the parapro test, even if they're working, for example, in a school that's a dual language school, there's still a lot of steps that need to be taken in English. So even if they're going to be a para in a Spanish speaking classroom in a Spanish dual language school where most things are happening in English and Spanish, right? There's an expectation of both languages being valued. It can be really hard to get hired. We've also found that for some of our folks who have become paraprofessionals, there's kind of a lack of initial training for paras. And so that's a really steep on-the-job learning curve, and people making mistakes that they didn't even know were mistakes, and then needing to learn from those mistakes when maybe those things could have been prevented. I will say the low paraprofessional wages are a reason that sometimes I see folks saying, I really love this, but I think I can do better sometimes working at CVS than I can as a paraprofessional. And so we need to really support the push and appreciate, shout out to the BTU for pushing right now for higher wages for paraprofessionals, because we want to see those entry level wages going up for people to really want to take this challenge on. And then I just have to say, funding for our program is always a challenge. And we're doing what we can on a shoestring budget, but really the parent mentors, when they're in their classrooms and are paid for their time in the classrooms, and that allows a group of parents that really represents the students of Boston to do the program and to find this passion. But it is also, there's a significant cost in paying people what we try to have as a living wage to do that. And so we're always looking for new sources of funding as well. In addition, I just kind of want to shift from the pipeline work that we do to talking about the action that we take, because our community doesn't just do these programs. We are organizers and advocates. And so multilingual learners and creating spaces with more resources for them has been the kind of core focus of our organizing work for the last couple years. Last year, we had a petition where we got 400 signatures from 50 schools that creates kind of a stronger vision of a future for multilingual learners. All our campaign work is led by our action committee, which is 8 peer elected members, usually parent mentors, who set the direction of our work. Shout out to Suhei, who leads that work. She's on here. We hosted the superintendent and her team and presented our vision for the future to her twice last year. And we gave more than 30 testimonies in front of different bodies, including the school committee. We also had a meeting with Desi about this, and in about 48 hours, got 40 parents together for that meeting to talk with them about what was going on. And we're not done advocating. So we recently launched a new petition talking about more native language resources for English learners. It fits well into the work that's happening on this panel, because the first ask in there is more bilingual certified teachers, as well as new bilingual programs, a lot around sharing information with families, better use of Title I EL funds, and the training that teachers need. So please if somebody can put the link in the chat, or I can when I'm done, if folks can please share this petition around. Send it to people that you know that care about this issue. We especially are looking for BPS families to sign onto this, but everybody is welcome to sign. And we are also open to connecting with any and all of you who are interested in getting involved. So please, I'll put my email in the chat and reach out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ari, very much for showing us how your organization is supporting bilingual ed here in the state and specifically in Boston. And you might receive an email from me and on behalf of my school for your parent mentor program. That sounds awesome. So thank you. Next up, we are going to hear from Eric Berg. Eric is the president of the Boston Teachers Union. Before being elected president, Eric was executive vice president of the BTU. He taught first and second grade for 25 years, most of it in the Boston Public Schools and at the Philbrick and Orenberger, but also in Somerville, New York City, Brazil, and Ecuador. Eric is a national board certified teacher, and the parent of 2 Boston Public School graduates. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for spending some time this evening on this really important issue. What that bio didn't say also that I just want to add is that the first 8 years of my career, I was a bilingual teacher until the UNS initiative passed in 2001, I think 2002. So and to be honest, much of what I was going to say has already been mentioned, so I'm going to try and not repeat all the great things that Akita and Ari said. And I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that a system confronts and that a school confronts in obtaining enough bilingual educators to meet the moment and meet the needs of our multilingual learners in an asset-based mindset, given that we're coming from a system and a state that has really taken a deficit mindset towards multilingual learners. And the first one, which has been touched on with the MTEL, but I want to actually unwind it even before the MTEL to just the layers and layers of bureaucracy that teachers and prospective teachers need to navigate to become not only a teacher, but a bilingual teacher. So there's degrees, there's licensure, there's endorsements, and then there's getting a job. At the level of getting your licensure, you need to pass the MTELs to get your license. And then to be a bilingual teacher, you need to obtain the bilingual educator endorsement, which presents a whole number of other hurdles, which can be both costly and complex. So for even for any person, it can be complex. For people who may not be that great just by, some people are really good at navigating bureaucracy and some people just aren't suited to it. And so that right there presents a challenge for many people. And then the added challenges that Akita alluded to of the emphasis on, for instance, English grammar for someone who is not a native English speaker can present a whole lot more challenges. So just getting licensed properly to be a bilingual teacher, getting your license in whatever subject area you need or elementary, and then getting the bilingual ed endorsement. It just presents a lot of hurdles that can take both time and money. And in the end, as Akita mentioned, some people just kind of give up and say, maybe this isn't for me. And they wind up doing something else. And that's a huge loss to our profession and to our schools. And then the next 2 things that I want to talk about are, I think, things that people don't often think about. I think there's this notion that, well, we have a lot of teachers and they're bilingual, so they're bilingual teachers. That's all we need. And that's really not enough. First of all, you have some people who are bilingual. They speak English and another language or more than one other language. And they may not be interested in teaching in a bilingual setting. And I think often people get pigeonholed or sort of you know, guided into a position or a role that they may not actually choose. There may be people who, yeah, I could teach in a Spanish portion of a dual language program or a Haitian Creole portion or whatever it may be. And they may say, that's not what I choose to do. I um I don't want to be like pegged as the Spanish speaking person or the Creole speaking person or the Vietnamese speaking person or whatever it may be. And we believe that people's ability to choose what role they do want ought to be respected. So there's also some sort of education. Well, I'll get to sort of solutions on the other end. The next thing in terms of personnel that I wanted to address are people who speak another language, but may not, and they may even be able to pass the test and get their bilingual educator endorsement, but they don't feel qualified or are not qualified to teach in that other language. And this has come up in particular, I think, with some Vietnamese speakers in Vietnamese bilingual programs locally. My guess is it could well come up for Cape Verdean teaching programs. People who, yeah, you can talk it and you can talk it pretty well, but if you have to explain like least common denominators and differential equations and that kind of thing, you might say, look, I'm not prepared to that. In the same way that when we get our learners in our classrooms able to have social conversations with their friends, we often think, oh yeah, they're good to go. They're ready. Boom. But that academic language is a real challenge for students, and it takes a lot more time to prepare our students to succeed in the academic world. And I think the same is true for educators who may be born in this country, may be born in another country, and are their first language or at least one and a half language was something other than English, but they may not feel prepared to actually teach content in that language. And then the final thing that I think bears thinking about is we have the teaching force right now that we have in many of our schools. So as we are expanding and rolling out bilingual programs in our schools, how that's done in a way that honors and values and accepts the contributions of the teachers who are currently in a school, and thinking of fair and humane ways to implement new bilingual programs that don't unnecessarily disrupt or destabilize the school community and result in the displacement of large numbers of other educators. So those are just some big picture hurdles, I think, that we need to think about in meeting the moment with more bilingual educators. And I think some of the good news is there's a lot of really good solutions to some of these things, and some of them have started to happen. I can't say there's a lot of solutions to the bureaucracy side of licensure, to be honest. That one is I think there could be, but I haven't seen a lot of things. But there has been a movement with really strong advocacy across Massachusetts from people who are concerned about the dearth of educators of color in our classrooms and of bilingual educators to change or provide other avenues to get past the MTEL issue. And a bill passed in the last session of the legislature, the Educator Diversity Act, which does allow for some alternatives to MTEL. And then there's a move afoot to sort of re-envision how MTEL works writ large to provide other pathways into the teaching field for people who have been struggling with MTEL. And we think that might really open the doors to a lot of people. And there are other teacher prep programs, or let's say educator prep programs, starting with the St. Stephen's Parent Mentor program that Ari just went through, which is an incredible opportunity for people who may not have a college degree, may not have a high school degree, to get their foot in the door in the field of education, often bilingual people. And if they choose to join a school community, join a preschool, and remain working in education. That's a huge benefit to our schools, although they may not be teachers at that point. But then guiding people into, already put it on a slide, the BEACTT program, Bilingual Educator Alternative Course to Teaching, I think, program that the Boston Public Schools runs, has had some success in bringing people with a bachelor's degree, often bilingual people, into teaching positions. And then there's a new program called the Bilingual Inclusive Education Master's Program. This is for people who already have a bachelor's degree, want to be a bilingual teacher, and they can get their master's degree over the course of, I believe, a year, maybe 15 months through BPS. And there are programs similar to this around the country that state Department of Labor, Workforce Development, I can't remember what it's called, along with DESE, is also establishing some apprenticeship programs, including in teaching, to try and bring people beginning in high school, actually, into the field of education. And I think ultimately that's the solution, is to nurture and shepherd people who are interested in education from high school into considering education as a career, facilitating that through college, through a residency program with funding, so that they don't need to, so they can come from a wide variety of backgrounds to be prepared to be a teacher through a residency program where they're working in a school every day for an entire year with the guidance of an experienced teacher mentor, and leave that with a teaching position in the Boston Public Schools. If we grow our own from within Boston, we are so much more likely to have skilled, competent, but especially dedicated people who are going to be committed to our schools because they went to the schools. They send their children to the schools. They're from Boston, and many of them speak another language. So what we're really looking for here, and I think ultimately the solution, is to move from what we have right now, which is a vicious circle that at every turn presents obstacles and difficulties and encourages people who might not be a native English speaker, might not come up from a background where everyone in their family went to college, and might get discouraged and not see people like them in the field, not really know much about bilingual programs, move from that to a virtuous circle where people can look around to many, if not most, schools and say, oh yeah, there's a bilingual program. I see how that works. I see the value that adds to our children, people like me. I want to be a part of that. There's a place for me there. And there's people who can guide me and mentor me along the way. So I'm not making it up as I go along and scrapping for every, a book in the language I'm supposed to teach in or resources, but rather see themselves, frankly, from childhood in an educator role in a bilingual program. And that is going to encourage people to come into the profession, if it's done well, and stay into the profession. So I want to not be Pollyanna-ish about the challenges we face, but I think long term, the more we establish high quality bilingual programs in our schools, kids graduate from them, they want to come back and contribute to that system that they were a part of. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Eric. I have a couple of first grade students in mind who have already expressed interest in teaching. So hopefully that residency program will
Isn't
be up
that the
and running.
best? I love that.
Yes, it is. Okay, closing out our webinar tonight, we have Patrick Proctor. Patrick is professor and chair of the Teaching, Curriculum, and Society Department at the Boston College Lynch School of Education and Human Development. He is a former elementary bilingual teacher whose work explores the intersections of bilingualism, literacy, teaching, and curriculum. He is the co-founder of the Bilingual Education Certificate Program at Boston College, which provides pre- and in-service teachers with state-level bilingual education endorsement. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks everyone for for joining, and Akita and Ari and Eric for their presentations. Super interesting, and all very related. So I'm going to share my screen and try to keep it relatively brief so we have some time for Q&A. So my job was to sort of describe and talk about ramping up bilingual education endorsement. I'm not sure I have the answers to this one, but we've heard some good ones already. But I just want to go through a few things. And again, some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I wanted to give people a sense, perhaps if you don't know, sort of what do you need? What does the state require that practitioners have in order to even get their bilingual endorsement? It's really comprised of three things. One is subject matter knowledge. So the state determines what that subject matter knowledge is. And so anyone who's providing this subject matter knowledge to students or to practitioners has to be approved by the state to do it. And so you need to show them that these understandings are embedded in any syllabi that you use, any course materials, any assignments. You have to show them sort of how you go through all of these different dimensions of bilingualism and bilingual education. And to be fair to the Department of Education, I think actually these are pretty good. They're broad enough that you can address them in a lot of different ways. But they're specific enough that they do actually get at issues, particularly in dual language bilingual education. And so when we bring primarily practitioners into our program, we have these three online courses that they have to go through and work through that address these 2, 4, 6, 7 dimensions of subject matter knowledge. The other two parts, to Eric's point about bureaucracy, all of it is very bureaucratic, but to Eric's point about bureaucracy, is a 75-hour program placement, which the state can often make very tricky. Either the program has to do the supervision, which is very challenging for practicing educators, or the district has to do it and provide assurances to the Department of Education that this 75-hour practicum placement has been met. Many times we're working with practicing bilingual educators who are in bilingual classrooms at the time, so the ideal is that just by teaching, they're in a practicum placement, but the level of supervision that's required by the state is often difficult to meet. And then we've heard a lot about MTELs and how challenging they can be in terms of the reading and writing and, the communications test and all of those things, but there's also a language MTEL. And to hear a lot of practitioners that I've worked with who speak, for example, Spanish as their home language, as their first language, the Spanish language MTEL and these other language MTELs are very unusual, and they don't necessarily tap the types of Spanish, the dialectical differences. These can be also very rigid, and so there's these challenges. Some that sort of reside with the providing agency, that in my case Boston College. Then there's others that are leveled on the actual person who wants to get endorsed, which would be the 75-hour practicum, but that also resides with the district, and also passing a language proficiency test, which resides directly with the student. So these demands get distributed across the different actors in trying to get people their endorsements. So then this idea of what should bilingual endorsement opportunities look like, and what I take some sort of heart, and I get some hopefulness in seeing that these different kinds of models are actually starting to expand in the state, like different ways that teachers can go about getting their endorsements. So, and some of the ones that I've been coming across now are sort of traditional pre-service teacher education models. These tend to be much more constrained. I'll use Boston College as an example. These are for credit. They're in person, sometimes online coursework. They're linked to practicum supervised experience that are where students are placed across different schools in the Commonwealth. The challenge here in a university like Boston College is finding the students with the linguistic resources who actually want to pursue bilingual certification. And so for our efforts at Boston College, the pre-service route has not been fruitful at all. The pipeline is a trickle because there's just not that many students who attend a university like Boston College who have the kind of linguistic capacities, like Eric was saying, to teach trigonometry in Spanish, for example, or even to teach photosynthesis in Spanish in an elementary school classroom. So moving into in-service teacher education model, this is sort of where a lot of the work that we do resides. You see much more variability in terms of the offerings that the providers provide. So these can be credit or non-credit bearing coursework. So the Boston College model is non-credit bearing, but it is SMK subject matter knowledge. It meets subject matter knowledge requirement, but participants don't get graduate credit. They can be in person or online, so there's some flexibility there. They can be linked to teachers' current positions. So the work of the subject matter knowledge requirements is linked to daily practice. And the district or the provider can do the 75-hour practicum. But in either case, the candidate's responsible for the language proficiency test. So ramping up, what we need are more providers doing more creative things and ways to get at this. And I have to say, Department of Education, elementary and secondary education has been not bad with funding bilingual education initiatives at the district level. There are bilingual education hubs in Boston and in the Southeast and out in Western Massachusetts, which has been fruitful, which has actually helped us develop some of these models that are out there. So for example, but university district partnerships are key. So Boston College, we've worked with Lynn and Salem in the greater Boston area, Worcester and Chelsea. Our models tend to be online, asynchronous, that accommodate a working teacher's schedule so they can do the work of the subject matter knowledge requirements, be getting feedback from a practicing teacher who is actually running the class, and get credit through Boston College that again levels up to the state, so they get credit for the subject matter knowledge. Other models like UMass Amherst works with Springfield and Amherst. Those tend to be face-to-face models where teachers actually come to the brick and mortar school. They take classes in a traditional graduate seminar. They're synchronous and they're credit bearing and funded. So some of the upsides with the funding from the Department of Education is no cost has been passed on to the teachers. The districts have received grant fundings and they pay so the teachers don't incur any cost. So there is some upside there where there's not a financial burden to some of these teachers. Some more recent work, my former student and colleague now, Chris Leader, who's at UMass Lowell, has recently been funded to work in the Southeast Massachusetts with Brockton Fall River and East Bridgewater University for the endorsement to work with teachers, education paraprofessionals, and community members and high school students as a grow your own attempt to really sort of solidify a pipeline across these different sectors of potential teachers to grow your own and actually keep them in the area and working toward their bilingual endorsements. And right now they're working with 108 multilingual people of color who are starting this coursework and starting to build up this pipeline in that region of the state. And also, I guess I'm kind of interested in DESE's new registered teacher apprenticeship program, which is a little hard to figure out, but it does show some promise where they're trying to actually seed these grow your own programs in the service of educator endorsement. This shows some promise and can be, and those are not necessarily bilingual, but they can be used for bilingual, for licensure and bilingual endorsement. And I guess the last thing I'd say on the grow your own and ramping up is The Boston College Messina College has a 2-year pipeline program primarily for students from Boston, Worcester, and other typically underserved areas that serves as kind of an associate's degree and pipeline into our School of Education, which results in an applied psychology degree, which then graduates then do a 5th-year program to get their teaching license, all of which can be funded if they come back into their home communities to keep teaching. So this is a true sort of grow your own kind of model. It's new, so we don't know sort of the impacts of it, but it's a very it's a good example, I think, of the potential of a grow your own model that could lead to increased licensure, specifically around bilingual endorsement. And then the last thing I would say is I actually been trying to do a little bit of research, and I just want to underscore sort of some of what Akita was saying. She was showing us that graph, that sort of distressingly, spreading out graph of students of color versus teachers of color. And it just struck me sort of the importance of multilingual practitioners for ramping up these efforts. So some of the work we've done in the our bilingual education endorsement program around research is we wonder sort of how are teachers making sense of a lot of those subject matter knowledge requirements, current contemporary issues in bilingualism, education, history and politics of bilingualism nationally and in Massachusetts. And what we find is these 4 kind of domains emerge with the way teachers make sense of these different areas. So thinking about their own background and identity, thinking about what does it mean? What does bilingualism in education mean? So Eric was talking about that doesn't necessarily mean bilingual education. There's lots of bilingualism in education that's not a bilingual education program. So what is sort of the nuance between those sorts of things? And what does that mean for teaching practice? What does that mean for professional goals? And these are findings that you might find with anybody, with any practicing educators, whether they're multilingual or not. But one thing we found was that the way that the practicing educators in our BEC program, almost all of whom are multilingual themselves, the way they made sense of the intersections between these was through their perceived and lived experiences that overlap with those of their students, affinity with their students' lived experiences, spoken languages, immigration history. And that's something that I think is different than you would hear. And now I don't know this, but I think it's different than what you would hear from native English speaking white teachers teaching in bilingual programs. I don't know how these things would flow together, but I don't think it would be in the same way through shared understandings, shared backgrounds with the students that they're teaching. And so I think that's to me, it underscores the need for grow your own models, for thinking about bilingual people being bilingual teachers and people who have grown up bilingual, not just people who have learned Spanish as their second language. So I'm going to stop there. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Patrick. That your final comment there really resonated with me. It was so interesting to have, thank you to all of our speakers, to have just a variety of people working at supporting bilingual education in the state from different angles. I wanted to open this up now to our audience for any questions that you may have for our speakers tonight. You can feel free to raise an electronic hand or a real hand, or put your question in the chat and I can read it out. Yeah, what do we want to ask the experts?
I would just chime in. I've just been informed that the Western Mass Bilingual Hub, they are not just face-to-face, they are hybrid courses. So that's a good thing to hear. So they give teachers more flexibility.
I see John Mudd has his hand raised.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. One of the issues that I wish the maybe Patrick Proctor or Akita or others might talk to is I'm struck also by nobody talking about what I perceive as, in a way, the programmatic direction in Massachusetts and Boston, which doesn't lead for demand for bilingual teachers. I mean, 98% of the multilingual students in the learners in the state are in SEI programs. So, the major demand is for the SEI endorsement, and Eric knows much more than me about the dual licensure, but it's not a demand for really either to hire or pay bilingual educators. And I wonder what the impact of that is. In universities or other people really developing a pipeline that can begin to close that gap that Akita had in her chart, if I'm being clear.
Go ahead, Akita.
Hi, John. So
Right.
I think that if I'm going to rephrase, I'm going to make sure I understand the question. The way that our systems and our the what's happening on a political and social, like in our social climate, the demand for bilingual education, like the programs, the way the systems are running are like basically not even giving bilingual education as an option, it seems like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about that a lot. And actually, Ari and I have discussed this about parent organizing. And a lot of the shift in this demand really, I think, has to come from helping parents understand why it is bilingualism is an asset. They have been, as an immigrant and as anyone who comes into this country, when you are faced with such strong anti-immigrant sentiment and you are faced with so much English only, you are afraid when you send your child to school that are they going to learn English? Parents need to understand, and there has to be so I know in Texas and California they have started doing this, and they have many more multilingual families than Massachusetts, but the climate is very different. Spanish and other languages have a much higher status, in my opinion, in Texas and California because of the number of of families that are multilingual. There has to be a stronger presence of parents of understanding that piece. And I know Ari has spoken about having families together, and if I had to point out one single thing that would shift, you can't change anything without changing mindset. And the mindset of parents, you shift that, then they can leverage more pressure onto school districts and on the, and in voting and, in the state as well. So those are my 2 cents about that issue.
Political leadership.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand up from Maria Mejia. I'm not sure if the hand is down. I want to give you a chance if you want to say something. Okay. Feel free to raise your hand again if you have something you want to say. Going on to Suleika.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My question is for Ari. So I know that you guys are building the new program. But I saw in one of your slides, right, there are some of the parent mentors, and obviously, right, like parents that come from other country, they may have a degree, right, in their country, their native country, and then they come here. If they like, I'm wondering about like the situation with the no high school diploma, right? Like I think it's a great thing around the barriers for parent mentors. So for the parents to be in the classrooms, right? They don't have to have that. But then how are you guys assisting parents with getting like in GED, for example, if they want to go on to become like a para? Because I know you guys are sort of building that pipeline. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about the support there.
Yes. Is CML still on, or I don't want to put her in the spot. So we're connecting a lot of our parent mentors, and also just because of our recruitment network and the community we built, we also just get like a lot of we're in touch with a few hundred parents in Boston public schools. And so when they come to us and they say, I want to do my I didn't finish my high school, then we connect them to high set programs. And MUA and JP Adult Education both have Spanish language high set programs that we send people to, and as well as a bunch of different programs around that have English language programs. And then we actually have a small program where we incentivize them, so when they actually pass their high set, they get a stipend, just to try to make it so we say use that stipend so that you can, if you need to DoorDash some dinner today while you're focusing on your class and you don't have to cook, or if you need to take a Lyft somewhere, or if you need to pay your cousin to watch your kids, like let's make sure you have the resources that you need in your own hands to be able to pass this test.
Wonderful, thank you. I wanted to just read out some comments that I saw in the chat. An audience member said BPS used to recruit teachers in Puerto Rico and Mexico. Perhaps now they could recruit in Catholic colleges. Another comment that said dual language immersion starts in kindergarten. Today's music videos and audiobooks are available to support emerging and early literacy skills development. Also teaching syntax and sentence patterns to introduce math and science skills can work well, especially if repetition is built in. Kids can take homework packets to help them explain in both languages the skills that studied all week long. So clearly people's creative juices are thinking about some solutions. Are there any other questions? Roger?
Yes, you said you read somebody's chat saying BPS used to recruit in Puerto Rico and Mexico. Used to was what the part of that I heard. Why used to? They don't do it anymore? Question.
I don't know. I don't know if someone can speak to that.
I don't know. I'm not aware of it for many years that they've recruited internationally.
And when they did it, they sent a team to Puerto Rico and they came back with one teacher. It was ridiculous. It was bad recruitment as well.
Well, the reason I ask is, I'm involved also with people in Denver. There are teachers, quite a few HB1 teachers and J1 teachers. The superintendent went down to the Dominican Republic and he went to Puerto Rico and they went to Central America and blah, blah, blah. And they got teachers.
Springfield School District is also recruited from Puerto Rico. So they're not the only school district. That Holyoke as well has gone down to Puerto Rico. And there are efforts. I think that this is not widely publicized, but it isn't one of the directions that people have thought about in terms of trying to address the gap.
One of the things that we've heard is it's the cost of living that becomes an issue. The teacher, hey, that's great. I'll make so much more than I'll be able to send money home. And then they get to wherever it is in the States. And they said, wait a minute. How am I going to live here, let alone send money back? So, but I'm just asking because other places do recruit abroad.
I asked a question to Ari about how the credits are given to the mentors, the parent mentors. because we also at UMass Amherst have had a program that prepared mentors, actually paraeducators, for teacher licensure. And what we did was we worked with the extramural, we have a changing name of our extramural education to recognize work experiences for academic credits. And I didn't hear that mentioned today in our meeting, but I think that's one way to have people that are being prepared through programs the mentor programs that Ari was talking about to also receive college credit for that employment experience. And I think that that has, in the past, has worked really well for us to get up to 60 credits halfway through a bachelor's degree and position our candidates for completing a much shorter program at the university for credit. So Ari, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And I would actually love to connect with the higher ed partners on here. It's something we've looked into in the past and not been successful at, around kind of aligning the standards that a college or university would have with the curriculum that we run for our Friday trainings. I think it would take some kind of creativity and working together to do it, but we would absolutely love to be able to offer college credit to our parent mentors for the amount of work. I mean, this is a 30-week program, 12 and a half hours a week, and they're in the classrooms. We're doing training on everything from civics education to early literacy to CPR to behavior management. And so, if that's something that any of you higher ed folks on here want to connect about, I would love to talk to you.
All right. Thank you all so much. One more final comment I'm seeing here in the chat says that the BTU could talk up any BPS incentive programs to have seasoned teachers serve as paid mentors to help parents pass the para protest. So I think this has been a very informative night. I want to thank all of our speakers for being here with us tonight, and everyone who took time out of their night to join us for this series and series in the past. I hope you'll have a wonderful night.
Maybe we can all come off mute and give a round of applause to Carolyn and our interpreter, Laura, and all of our excellent speakers and audience members who asked great questions. And